In 2021, Jeff Bezos had an opportunity of a lifetime. He went with Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, into space. After their flight, with tears falling down his cheeks, Shatner described what he had witnessed. He said, "What you have given me is the most profound experience I can imagine. It's extraordinary. Extraordinary. I hope I never recover from this." Of all the branches of philosophy, Stoicism is the most pragmatic and actionable. It's about finding tranquility independent of circumstance, by understanding and mastering what you control and letting go of what you don't. This podcast is about bridging the gap between the beautiful, concise teachings of the Stoics and everyday life. Each week, we bring quotes from the Stoics that are meaningful to us on our journey to better embody the ideals that they taught, with the hope that seeing personal struggle will be universally applicable. I know, it was actually a pretty quick little cold that I had there.
Oh, congrats on getting over it.
Well, yeah, because I have a cough once every 16, I don't know, like after sports or like stuff like that. But like,
well, please turn that off for the episode.
but it's usually like it lingers on forever. Like I have a cough forever, but
Forever or just more time than you'd expect?
Ponder that one.
I want to become the Stoic Nazi.
Stoic Satan. So we call this segment of the show, "You Thought Your Monday Was Bad." And I'm going to read you a list of all the ways that humans suffer that ChatGPT could do on the free version. Money problems, negative body image, nostalgia, overthinking, parenting challenges, peer pressure, performance anxiety, perfectionism, post-traumatic stress disorder, poverty, pressure to succeed, procrastination, rejection, relationship conflicts, self-doubt, self-harm, self-worth issues, sexual identity struggles, shame, control issues, cultural barriers, death, decision-making, depression, despair, addiction, aging, alienation, anger, anxiety, apathy, betrayal, bitterness, body image issues, breakups, bullying, burnout, career uncertainty, change, chronic illness, codependency, communication breakdowns, comparison, confusion, discrimination, divorce, debt, doubt, eating disorders, emotional abuse, existential crises, financial struggles, forgiveness, grief, guilt, health issues, heartbreak, homelessness, identity crisis, imposter syndrome, insecurity, insomnia, intimacy issues, impatience, inability to forgive, inadequacy, indecision, inertia, inflexibility, intergenerational trauma, intolerance, lack of motivation, lack of purpose, limiting beliefs, loss of identity, social anxiety, spiritual crises, stress, substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, trust issues, unemployment, unsatisfying relationships, weight-related struggles, work-life balance, work-related stress, abandonment, adaptation, adjustment, alienation, ambivalence, apprehension, attachment issues, autonomy, belonging, boundaries, change management, commitment issues, compulsive behaviors, isolation, jealousy, loneliness, loss, low self-esteem, mental health stigma, midlife crisis, decision paralyses, dependencies, desensitization, disconnection, dissatisfaction, and emotional detachment, empathy fatigue, escapism, ethical dilemmas, existential angst, exploitation, external validation, dependencies, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, fitting in, freedom versus responsibility, mediocrity, control struggles, coping with loss, cultural clashes, failure, family conflicts, fear, disappointment, memory loss, mistrust, multitasking overload, narrow-mindedness, negative thinking patterns, objectification, overworking, people-pleasing, perceived expectations, superficial relationships, suppressing emotions, temptation, restlessness, rigidity, role conflicts, rumination, self-criticism, resentment, self-sabotage, sensory overload, settling for less, power struggles, social comparison, stereotyping, stifled creativity, subordination, temptation, time management challenges, unrealistic expectations, unresolved trauma, unrequited love, validation seeking, victim mentality, volatility, worrying about the future, and zero-sum thinking.
And that was all in one breath. So these are the things that Bruce has told me he struggles with.
Yeah. It's a short list of things that I have problems with on a day-to-day basis.
I felt like we needed a joke to lighten that up a bit. When Bruce showed me this list, I think what we're trying to convey with this, and not just a tongue-in-cheek, your Monday must be bad, but listen to this, but just the depth and breadth that there is struggles within humanity.
And I did a little study on struggling well, and part of that was like kind of defining struggle. And the interesting part about struggle that is difficult is because it means that we can't accomplish something that we think we can, right? Like if you think about somebody struggling for air when they're swimming, it's this thing that you want to or desperately want to accomplish, but you're incapable of doing, right? And so at least you're having at present failure if you're struggling. And so like if you're struggling in school or you're struggling these different things, it has this idea of failure, uncertainty, and like just a sense of like kind of severity to it. It's really important, I think, with Stoicism in particular, because it's a philosophy that allows for emotional resiliency. It's just to first recognize that human beings do struggle, and in a lot of ways, and it's very deep.
Right. And I think almost everybody would know several people for most of those things on the list. And some tons for one, or spread out over others. And this definitely isn't a comprehensive list. Once again, it was just from the free version of ChatGPT because Bruce refuses to splurge on that.
Yeah, if I would have had GPT-4, we could have been here for much longer.
But I think the point stands that it's just there's so much going, and I think anybody could think of more things. The point is not to be sad about the struggling of humanity, but the point we wanted to get to was looking at how the Stoics, one of the ways the Stoics use to overcome that struggle and to make it not be emotionally damaging in our lives.
Yeah, because our hope was with reading that list that you feel a little bit of weight, like the gravity of it, because I think there's a lot to that. But what we're going to do is take our perspective from where gravity is really intense to where there's far less of it. And the way that we're going to do this, we want you to visualize for a moment you. So we're going to start by visualizing, not looking at you from the way that we normally do, which is the view from our nose. And ultimately what we're going towards is the view from above. First, we want you to imagine that you're somebody looking through the window at yourself. And pick any one of those struggles that we mentioned at the beginning of the call that you think is particularly weighty for you. And now view yourself going through that struggle as somebody looking through the window at yourself. And what does that change about your struggle? And now let's go a little bit further. Let's take a view from the city and look down at the city and now look at your struggle. And how big is it compared to the city and the people that are living there and everything that goes on in a city? And now let's move it to the state, or for our friends in other countries, the territory.
Or province.
And now think about the struggle in comparison to the people in that bigger geography. And then now move it to the country and viewing that from the country and viewing it from the planet. And now from the planet to our solar system, and from our solar system to the Milky Way, and from the Milky Way to all the other galaxies that are in the universe. And now thinking about that, what If you view your struggle from that perspective, what does that change about your feeling of its importance?
The hope is a lot. What I love about this exercise, I hope you all were able to visualize that and go through that with us a little bit. But I think when you're in the midst of these struggles, and I mean, reading the list, it's undeniable. You read any one and your heart kind of aches for the person going through that. Or if it hits close to home, you might feel like, yes, like that's me. But what I love about this is like, as you start to get further away from just yourself, the problems seem to kind of lose their weight on you. And we're going for kind of an analogy with gravity and weight, where it's interesting, the further away you get from Earth, the less Earth's gravity will have a pull on you. And same way, the further you get from yourself, visualizing yourself and your problems, the less weight they hold on you. And so as we do these exercises, the Stoics saw a view from above, this idea that you can kind of externalize to look at yourself indifferently and not be so bogged down by problems. But the hope is that as you do so, it gets a little bit easier to carry your burdens and carry them well. And like you said in your little study, struggle well. Because we're still trying to accomplish things, and the problems are real and they are difficult, but the more we can stop being weighted down by them and just see them objectively from the outside, the more we're able to solve them and move forward.
And that's why the study was on struggling well, is because everybody struggles, and the more that you try to accomplish big and hard things, the more that you're going to struggle, from the definition of the more failure you're going to have, the more uncertainty, and like you're going to realize your own inability. And so learning to struggle well, I think, comes from like things like a view from above, and the things that we've been talking about for the past few weeks is having the right perspective on it. So Marcus says, there's a fine saying of Plato that he who is discoursing about men should look at earthly things as if he viewed them from some higher place, should look at them in their assemblies, armies, agricultural labors, marriages, treaties, births, deaths, noise of the courts of justice, desert places, various nations of barbarians, feasts, lamentations, markets, a mixture of all things, and an orderly combination of contraries. I mean, and that's really where the view from above comes from. Marcus is a really big proponent of these ideas, but it's like viewing things from that higher place. And to me, it's kind of like the ocean. If you're always on the surface of the ocean emotionally, then you're always being tossed about by the waves as they come.
Every wave hits a lot harder.
Yeah. But the deeper you go into the ocean, the more calm and still it is. And like it's that depth, right? And so I think, ironically, we're gonna mix analogies here, but like a view from above puts you a lot deeper, in the sense that like you're talking about things that are more core and more universal, as opposed to those things that where most people live their lives, right? Because the list that we talked about, and probably way more, like if you talk to what people struggle about every day, it's like they're talking about politics, or they're talking about celebrities, or they're talking about things like that, which are very crests of waves. But the Stoics are just trying to get into that deeper sense and that stiller sense. And so I think by viewing the whole of existence, you begin to recognize that you're just a piece of that. And it's like we were talking about, is your death is going to be a tragedy to you. It'll be a tragedy to your family, the whole human race. Even if you're an important person to all of humanity, in the scope of things, you're not that important of a person. Just because, and not in like a negative sense, right? Because I think there's kind of these like contradictory things where it's, yes, like a single human life is invaluable, right? Like it's precious. Like you should do anything that you can to keep it, while at the same time recognizing that like in the broader sense, it's very finite.
And I think it's very, well, first I think your analogy holds water,
Whoa, okay. One
Can't
step
let that one
closer
on the
to being a
fly.
dad.
I didn't actually have a comment about that. I just wanted to make that joke.
Mic drop.
Well, I think it does hold water because, one, when you go, well, barring scary sea creatures, some of us don't like sharks.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the further down you go, the more still it becomes, and the more like the water itself isn't moving at all. And ironically, you become weightless underwater.
Or more pressurized. But yeah, in water. Yeah.
We don't need to get into the
Yeah.
metaphysics of it. The Stoics kind of avoided
I'm pretty sure if you go down far enough, you'll just explode, Justin.
I've never been scuba diving, so I'll just talk as if I know, but I know nothing about it.
Yeah, so we're doing height and depth, right? But I think we do use that term, like the depth of something. And so yeah, I think the weightlessness comes from like not being tied to gravity, in the sense that like on Earth, everybody's walking around in 6-foot ceilings, and most of us are like, well, I mean, the true height of a man is like 5'8".
I was gonna say with those 6-foot ceilings, I would have to be crouching the whole time.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like we walk around in these really small buildings, and so when you take people out to like the wilderness and they see the stars, I think that's part of the reason why we have awe, because it's that perspective, right? Our human creations are very small in the comparison to all of creation. Those are the deeper things in the sense of it being something that we like very profound. But yeah, like it takes us to new heights. I'm trying to reconcile the contradiction we've created.
It's okay. We'll just assume it's okay.
Yeah, not every contradiction needs to be resolved.
Well, I mean, it is interesting just the perspective. I mean, there's kind of the classic, somebody takes a humanitarian trip and they see poverty for the first time. And they go, oh my goodness, like all these things. And ironically, I think a lot of people end up really hyper-focusing on one specific thing once they do that. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, seeing more of the world, and hopefully in a broader sense than just like little trips or something, hopefully changes us to be a little more cognizant of things. And the little things matter a lot less, and we can focus on bigger things that matter more for ourselves, for other people, and just everything. And I'm reminded, there was a good friend of mine. He grew up in a really small town in South America. And I took a trip, and we took him with us. We went on a ferry across the river to another country there, and it was like a big city. And he had just never been out of his small town. And he's like just the best person, like undoubtedly. So this is not a knock on him at all, but it was just fascinating. Like we got on the big ferry to go across, and he's just like, I've never been on a boat before. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I couldn't even comprehend that. I was like, wow. Okay. And then we got to the city, and at the time I'd been living in Miami, which just so many bridges and highways, and everything is just so complex, and sometimes a little too complex. Doesn't make any sense when you're driving, but it was just fascinating. Like we got to the big city, and he's just like looking around, and he's like, the bridges are huge. I cannot believe cars are on bridges or on highway. Like he's seeing highways for the first time. And there was just a moment where I just looked at him, and I was like, I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, your world is so small, and like this is your first time leaving it. And it was kind of eye-opening for me that he had never seen a lot of things that I just took for granted as like parts of everyday life, but his first time in a big city was just seeing everything for the first time. And there was something kind of inspiring about how everything gave him that sense of awe, whereas I was just like, oh, the highway, oh, like a bridge, like a ferry, like, oh, I hope we get there soon, you know?
Well, doesn't it make you wonder in your own life, is there still like vast worlds of understanding that haven't been explored?
I think definitely so. And part of it, and this is totally tangential to a view from above. I think my constant struggle point in life is wondering how much I should learn as much as I can of what I know now versus keep expanding to new things. It's like, how much do you explore something before you move on to the next thing? Because there's people who like have seen every city in the world, and I'm like, okay, but did you learn anything? Or as Seneca likes to put it, people who travel the world often have a lot of places to find hospitality, but no true friends.
Which I think is true about rooting down in things. But I do like, in context of this conversation, when we spend our whole lives focused on the very mundane, or not mundane, but like focused on the very day-to-day trivial struggles and don't kind of elevate our viewpoint, we can miss so much of the beauty of life. Because I think it was a revelation for me when I started thinking about the view from above and recognizing that the whole optimizes for itself, not for the individual. So like when you think of the universe, like the universe is optimizing for the universe and what's good for the universe. That's why we're born and die and get turned back into dirt, and then dirt becomes trees, hopefully, or like the earth like is eventually going to go when the sun becomes a red dwarf, right? It's just going to be eaten by the sun again. And then
Yum.
and the sun's not even going to notice. It's just so interesting how it's like this infinite loop of like just the recycling of elements into each other to create new things to then implode it. And everybody, we all can recognize that in our own lives too. I mean, our lives are not optimizing for us. They're also optimizing for the whole, and there's this sense of constant change and repurposing of experiences and events and stuff in our life. And so what I think is beautiful about the view from above is when you recognize that you're just a part of a whole. Like in American culture anyway, it's me, I all the time. Like lift yourself up from the bootstraps. I'm a self-made person. Like I did this all by myself. Isn't this so cool? All that. But I think what's beautiful is like when you kind of step back to this idea of, no, we're actually part of a whole, and the whole is our families, is humanity, is our nations, is the earth, is the universe. And so if you're getting older, like aging in Western societies, I feel like is a taboo. Like you just shouldn't do it. Like you need a Botox and you need
plastic surgery, Botox, hair implant, a wig.
If you're one of those people that aging happens to, you need to make sure that nobody else knows. But just think, for instance, in that where it's like recognizing that, yes, there is a part of your life when you're young that you're the star of the show. But the older that you get, the less star of the show you are in a certain sense, right? You're no longer the athlete. You're now a parent. You're raising kids. The kids are the star of the show. You won't get your best racing times, or you'll probably phase out of tennis as far as like being super competitive with other people. And that's a part of the experience, right? And when you view it from above, you not being the star anymore is not as bad.
Right. And what's interesting is we see the same, the whole optimizing for the whole rather than optimizing for the parts. We see that just within our own bodies. Like you in running, I'm sure your feet after 26 miles are saying like, why are you not optimizing for me? You know, like if your mind were in your feet, it would be saying that. But because your mind is in your mind, you get to decide it.
Several stories above in the logistics department.
Yeah. The HR. Insulated from the consequences of the world.
Yeah,
get to mandate everything.
It is the HR of the body, but like...
No, we love HR. But it's interesting that we so naturally do that for ourselves, but I think it's really difficult to take into account the world doing that. And this is the idea that you say, like, I'm the feet. Like, maybe this sucks right now, but it's accomplishing something greater than I could ever do by stopping.
Yeah, I mean, it's just imagining, like, a conversation between you and one of your white blood cells. and the white blood cells like fighting valiantly against your cold or whatever. Okay, I'm not a biology major. I don't know if it's white or red blood cells that do this. But anyway, one of your cells is fighting off the cold, and it's just like talking up to you as the owner of the body. It's like, don't let me die, and then you as the owner of the body, you're like, it's for a good cause, okay? Like, it's not that bad. Like, I appreciate your sacrifice, but like, there's a much bigger thing going on here, which is I've got an exam and I need to feel good or whatever, It's funny because it's like we're the little blood cells, of the universe, right? But it's like, no, I don't want to die. And the universe is just like, they're there. I've got a lot more important things to do,
So if anybody asks you what you've done with today, you can say, I listened to a really emotional story about a white blood cell talking to a person.
I know.
I'll cross that off my bucket list. I think a really interesting example that I wanted to bring to this from a TV show, my favorite of all time.
Really?
Over the Garden Wall. Yeah. Well, it's about the length of a movie.
Above Star Trek Picard.
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
For me. This is my personal list. It's called Over the Garden Wall. It's a classic. And very good for the Halloween season. So watch it. I have it legally shared with me on my laptop.
Justice. Continue.
I've done more for that show than anybody. No, but
well,
anyway,
we're getting the word out there about it. I think it needed your help.
There's two characters. They're I think 12 and 9 about, and so it's interesting. You can put yourself in the eyes of a 12-year-old boy, where everything that happens to you is kind of the biggest thing that could happen to you. And so there's a moment where I won't give any. Well, it might be slight spoiler. It's very old.
I think it's fine, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, there's a girl that this 12-year-old is very interested in, and this other guy comes, and he's kind of like, he's also interested in her, and so this 12-year-old boy, he thinks she is totally into him. He's kind of, and you as the viewer can see he's totally self-deceived into thinking she's totally into the other guy when she's like giving him every sign that she's interested in him. She's like, wow, I really hope to see you there. Like, oh, we're doing this. Like, do you want to come too? And he sees that the other guy is going. He's like, no, you and the other guy have fun. Like, and things like that. But he makes it like a tape for her with him playing clarinet and talking poetry that he wrote. And he puts it in her jacket. So he's trying to get this tape back, and he realizes he's not going to get the tape back. So him and his brother are talking, and there's just this moment where he just screams, just, my life is crumbling all around me. And it's just like the most, like, I mean, even as an adult, even just being removed from the 12-year-old experience, which I'm sure everyone had that my world is crumbling all around me moment. It's so easy to see how, like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, you're going to get over that really soon. But in the moment, it's so hard to get outside of yourself and look at it because it feels so big. And I think it's especially pronounced in children, but I think sometimes it's difficult to grow out of that, where every problem feels like the biggest thing in the world, even though your whole life, the problems, whether you've solved them or just let them grow, they've come and gone. They'll still always just leave. Well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of problems, no matter what you do, they're just going to go away at some point.
Well, they ultimately will.
That's true.
But yeah, like, I love this quote, and I want to get it put up on my wall when I have my nice minimalist mansion.
Love it.
My tiny home.
Is minimalist mansion an oxymoron?
No, it makes sense to me. Well,
yeah.
My goal is to like get. I want to live in a really, really, really wealthy neighborhood, and then have the smallest like tiny home. Like I want to have like acres of flat grass, if that, and then in the middle of that is my tiny, tiny home, and it's just like, yeah, what's up? And
Bruce, what are you trying to prove?
I don't know, but I think it's important. But anyway, the quote on my minimalist mansion wall, if it fits, just would say never underestimate the vast unimportance of almost everything. And recognizing that human struggle is real and recognizing that it's hard and it's difficult and all this stuff, at the same time, it's one of those things that's not that important. Like, it seems like a contradiction, right? It's like we need to act. We need to obviously solve the things in our lives and do the best that we can and do this. But at the same time, there's really not that much weight. Because even if your actions like destroyed all of humanity, well, maybe that's like not too dramatic. But it's just like, but that's the thing is there's actually not that much weight. Because it's just like, what's the worst thing that can happen to a human being, right? It's like, well, your family can be tortured, I guess. Probably, and you can die. But that is the worst, right? And in the scheme of things, it's finite. It won't last forever, no matter what you have. Like anything that you can, if it's pain, and this is another thing. I forgot what this is a rough like Stoic idea, but it's just like if it's pain and you're enduring it, then it's endurable. Like if it's pain and you're alive, then it's endurable. If it's not endurable, you'll be dead, and that's also finite too. And so it's just kind of recognizing that everything that we hold as being super important is not quite as important as we think it is. And so it just creates this kind of looseness, right? Where it's like we need to act and accomplish the things that we think are valuable in life. But if we fail at it, it's also... I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal.
It'll be all right.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a little. I don't love the family getting tortured thing.
Well, I was just trying to think of.
But
you have to consider the worst that can happen, right? Because that's probably the worst that.
This is maybe this will be a little more relatable, but this is kind of how I think about it. I mean, so I'm graduating my university this semester. Going out into
valedictorian,
going out into the big bad world, and there's just been so many things like trying to get internships, trying to get into my major, into university, do well in my classes, like all these things that like they're not important, but they feel really important and really pressing at the time. And I think maybe the way I've kind of tried to practice this has been. When I get kind of overwhelmed by it or like frustrated, like, oh, I didn't get that internship I really wanted, like, oh, what am I going to find? Like, at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, you know what? Worst case scenario, I just leave college with literally nothing and I go work at McDonald's and I can live so cheaply and I could afford to pay rent and live. Like, at the end of the day,
that's more relatable than my analogy.
Well, I just didn't know why family getting tortured had to come into it.
Well, I was just trying to think of the worst humans suffer, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I mean, it makes sense. But just a smaller scale of this to maybe take some weight off the problems that we're thinking about. It's like, at the end of the day, I was like, okay, like, if I don't get my dream job, my dream internship, my perfect college experience, at the end of the day, I know I'll have what I actually need. Like, I know I can make do with what I have. And then it just takes the pressure off it. It's like going into an interview, I'm like, okay, like they don't give me this job. That's fine. And going into the interview, it makes me a lot more calm and confident. And like, when you have nothing to lose, you perform your best. And you really have nothing to lose. We have nothing of importance.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
except our virtue.
Yeah, except our virtue. But it is true. It's just like, I mean, Steve Jobs in his Stanford address, like, I mean, he talks about how we're all going to die. We all come in the world naked, right? Like, so you have nothing to lose, right? Like, you just don't have anything. There's nothing to lose. If maybe, like, you weren't going to die and you were going to living on Earth for forever, right? Then maybe there's like something to lose or gain, but it's just like, no, like we all know the ending. And so like there really isn't anything to be afraid of. And I think what we're trying to talk towards is the Stoic idea of apatheia, which is not to be confused with apathy.
Although it was derived from that.
Yeah. So
but corrupted.
It's
just like the word Stoic itself.
Seriously, take Stoic back. Let's go to the streets.
Hashtag retake Stoic. Hashtag retake apatheia.
If we organized a protest, how many people do you think we could get there? 10? 20? Anyway.
I've got a lot of Facebook friends. No.
Yeah, I did want to do a one-person... In 2020, I was going to go do a one-person march.
Just for yourself?
Well, just like, it was going to be something like, protests are stupid was going to be my, like, thing.
Oh, boy.
Just, it was all the rage. I missed it. I missed the window. But anyway, so apatheia is basically this idea of a state of being free from unhealthy passions and emotions. It's tranquil, untroubled, undisturbed state of mind. And it's not about, it really isn't about emotional suppression, but rather achieving emotional equilibrium through rationality and self-control. So with a view from above, you really start to see things from a better perspective, which gives you a different way of working with your emotions, right? Because if you're coming from the perspective of, I'm the most important person on this planet, and I need to turn this assignment in on time, or I'm going to fail this class, and this is the most important thing I do. As the most important person on the planet, this is the most important thing that I'm doing right now, and therefore this is like code red, right? Like, that's one perspective to have on life. And then another is, I'm a very small little white blood cell in the vast whole of the universe.
You'd be lucky to be a white blood cell, because that actually has a function instead of just the red blood cell. Well, actually, I don't know anything about biology.
Business majors pontificating about the workings of the body.
Because the white blood cells, they like fight off diseases. They're a lot more rare, and they fight off diseases.
I believe so.
Anyway,
since we haven't mentioned this yet, if you're a biologist and you're listening to this podcast, it's Modern Meditations Podcast at gmail.com. If you're cringing when you're hearing this,
send in your corrections, and we'll correct it next episode.
But basically, that's the idea, is you're a lot more likely to have apatheia if you have correct views on the thing. And that's why we're talking about Fantasia Cataleptic. It's why we're talking about A View from Above. That's why in the next weeks we're talking about Memento Mori and Amor Fati, is because all of these are disciplines that give you that tranquility through reason. And so when people talk about Stoicism as emotional suppression, it's not. It's like, I won't have the same emotions as you if I don't think I'm the center of the universe. It's like, I'm just not experiencing the same things that you're experiencing. It's not I'm suppressing anything. I'm not denying my emotions. I have a different perspective, and therefore I'm feeling different things than you're feeling.
Right. And the apatheia, once again, maybe we should go over just the modern definition of apathy and how that's different. But that's the lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern. And it's a bad thing. Well, it's a dispreferred.
Well, I think it's a bad thing, because it's a moral thing, right?
Right. It's like, you don't care.
Like
you
apathy
really
is not
care.
courage. It's not justice. It may be temperance sometimes,
not.
but
No,
unlikely
I don't think
to be.
It can be. But anyway, not to get into apathy, but just how that's changed. Apatheia that the Stoics taught about is just the disconnecting from the bad feelings, like intense grief or intense pleasure. Those are the things that are like not sustainable, that don't create the good life. And so being able to have, like you said, the correct judgments, correct perceptions, and being able to see a little bit more than beyond yourself, get out from just the view of from your own nose, but see the whole world, and just being able to do that just by yourself, just being able to detach and see that, to get a little bit more perspective, is the way that they taught that we could rise above our struggles and be a little bit more weightless with the worries that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty. And in my head, like, I kind of have this vision of like who I would like to be, and someone that truly embodies apatheia, where it's, you understand your place in the world and in the order of things, and you are able to deal with good and bad and like the struggles that come through life in a way that is very like calm, rational, and I don't know, it just seems like a way of living life to the fullest. Like if you can maintain your equanimity through all circumstances, and being able to achieve that, I think is like, this is one more, like a view from above is one more way of accomplishing that, one more tool in the tool belt.
And maybe one more quote from Marcus here that I really like, because I have a great love for rivers. But he says, constantly reflect on how swiftly all that exists and is coming to be is swept past us and disappears from sight. For substance is like a river in perpetual flow, and its activities are ever changing, and its causes infinite in their variations, and hardly anything at all stands still. And ever at our side is the immeasurable span of the past and the yawning gulf of the future, into which all things vanish away. Then how is he not a fool who in the midst of all this is puffed up with pride, or tormented, or bewails his lot, as though his troubles will endure for any great while? And I think this is a great spot to kind of wrap up the discussion, where, Marcus tells us to kind of see the huge span of existence as this big river, and it goes on infinitely before us and will go on infinitely after us, and we're only at this moment in the river. And so kind of like, don't puff yourself up. Like, you're not a big person for having a handful of water in the river right there. There's just infinite before and infinite after. And I do see, and I don't want people to think like my life doesn't matter, this sucks, and fall into apathy, but instead to just be able to feel the water you have and know that like it's incredible. You have the present, and find apatheia. And it's like when things are tough, it's like, look at the river spanning past you. It's like, it'll keep going forever. That's okay. That's good. And it's like, and when things are good, then live in the good. It's great. Life is beautiful. Seneca once said, sometimes even to live is an act of courage.
There it is.
To bring out one of my favorites.
We must be evangelizing right now. But yeah, I do think it's true. I think sometimes we confuse duration with value, and it's just not true. It's just, life is brief and small, but infinitely worthwhile. Going along with our theme of exploring the plight of humanity, we've pulled a classic country song that, if you're one who listens to that genre, you might have heard of before. It's by Toby Keith, and the title might give away why we think this is important to talk about on an episode about a view from above, but it's called I Want to Talk About Me. And so we're just going to switch off doing, not a completely dramatic reading of it, but a reading of it, and just want you to keep that in your mind on how this relates to a view from above as we go through this, and then we'll kind of discuss it a bit at the end. The song begins, yeah, that's right. We talk about your work, how your boss is a jerk. We talk about your church and your head when it hurts. We talk about the troubles you've been having with your brother, about your daddy and your mother, and your crazy ex-lover.
We talk about your friends and the places that you've been. We talk about your skin and the devils on your chin, the polish on your toes and the run in your hose. And God knows we're going to talk about your clothes. Talking about you makes me smile. But every once in a while,
I want to talk about me. I want to talk about I want to talk about number one, oh my, me, my. What I think, what I like, what I know, what I want, what I see. I like talking about you usually, but occasionally I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
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 That's the background voices.
It's great.
We talk about your dreams and we talk about your schemes, your high school team and your moisturizing cream. We talk about your nanny up in Muncie, Indiana. We talk about your grandma down in Alabama.
We talk about your guys of every shape and size, the ones that you despise and the ones you idolize. We talk about your heart, about your brain and your smarts and your medical charts. And when you start, talking about you makes me grin, but every now and then,
I want to talk about me. Want to talk about I. Want to talk about number one. Oh my, me, my. What I think, what I like, what I know, what I want, what I see. I like talking about you, usually. But occasionally, I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
Me. You. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about I want to talk about number one. Oh my, me, my. What I think, what I like, what I know, what I want, what I see.
I like talking about you usually, but occasionally I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
Me.
I want to talk about me.
Me.
Oh, me.
Me.
So I've definitely never said the word me as many times as I've said in the last minute. Okay, so why did your mind race to this song when we were discussing A View from Above earlier?
I just feel like everybody is basically, like, when they're having conversations with other people or they're thinking about life, they're like, yeah, I like talking about you usually, but I want to talk about me, And I just think, I don't know, this perfectly describes, I mean, it's country, right? It's American. Like, it very much is like kind of the Western way of viewing the world, right? Where it's like, yeah, we can talk about you, but I really want to get back to, like, the reason I talk to you is so that we can talk about myself. And I think it's a trap that we all kind of get caught up in sometimes, where thinking that we're the center of the universe. Because, I mean, if somebody thought they were the center of the universe, I think it would be in line with their character to write this song, right? Yeah. Which I don't know if Toby Keith is I think this song is meant to be funny.
Right. We'll just take this as a microcosm of his personal life and a meta commentary on just the overall nature of the United States right now.
That's what I'm drawing from it.
No, I mean, my dad, he loves, whenever he talks to people, he's kind of like, he likes to be a charmer, so to speak. And he always tries to get other people to talk about themselves.
Is that real fur?
And he says, I know it's a good conversation if they talked about themselves for 80% of it. And I don't think it's that difficult. But going back to this relationship in the song that we're talking about, it seems like both people are a little bit blinded by themselves. And it's probably really hard to see the other person. Although you did make a good point. He has been listening pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has. He can at least list off everything that she talks about, right? Which doesn't sound that substantive.
But are you listening well if you resent everything you've heard?
Well, I mean, he's not.
Sounds like he should have talked about himself before this, because now every time she talks about herself, he's listening really carefully to be able to criticize and call her out in his lyrics later.
Well, but he does say that I like talking about you usually. So this might be just once a year or something. You say, I want to talk about me briefly, but nothing about the amount of time that he repeats the word me. He says briefly, like this is going to be some like minor thing, but I do think it's it's interesting that way. And then the subject matter of their conversations, no judgment, but I just wonder if Seneca or Epictetus might take issue with the depth of what they're talking about.
The devil's on her chin.
Talking about her skin, or the polish on her toes. And,
I didn't quite get that line. The devil's on her chin.
Yeah, or the run in your hose.
Like how the water pressure in your hose. I think is what I was going for.
Yeah, pretty is.
It's written H-O-S-E for clarification.
Yeah, it's kind of banal.
I mean, so what you're saying is this guy's significant other is extremely toxic, is what you're saying.
Possibly. Well, I just don't think he'd be should be a philosopher's wife. Let's just say that. Because I do think that's the other point from this song is we spend so much of our life talking about these like lists of like tiny things, which I get it, right? Like it's part of life, and people are proud about the casserole they make or the shine on their toes or like stuff like that. But it just is amazing when you take a view from above of how inconsequential that is and like how lacking in substance or meaning that is. Because nowhere in this song, it's a false dichotomy in this song. It's like either we can talk about you or we can talk about me, as opposed to we can talk about ideas or I don't know. There's a few other topics, you know?
Right. And from the song, it sounds like this relationship is marked with chronic selfishness in subject matter of conversation. And maybe to paint a more appropriate picture, me and my girlfriend have a really healthy relationship.
Do you guys ever find yourself talking about the polish on her toes or the run in her hose or the devil on her chin?
No to two of those. I'll let the viewer decide. No, I'm kidding. No, well, I think it is interesting because, like, I mean, everybody talks about themselves quite a bit. But, I mean, like we said, like he's saying in the song, like, sometimes I want to talk about me. It's like if everybody wants to talk about me, there's just no way to split it 50-50 perfectly. But I think what's fun with me and Krista is we talk about Stoicism. And we also talk about...
it seems like more maybe your want, not knowing Krista. But
yeah, she indulges me. And then we also, we went to the Taylor Swift concert last night.
In the theater?
Yes, the movie version of it. She went to the real one. She's a mega Taylor Swift fan.
No value judgment.
I'm just glad I still have my voice because I was screaming a lot in the theater.
With all your fellow Swifties.
You think I'm joking, but I actually had a blast just yelling.
Unironically?
Ooh. Okay. You got me there.
I could see that being something you'd really enjoy.
I had too much fun. This is the last side note, and then we'll be done. But there was a lot of people were standing up in the theater, all the songs. No. There was these three girls who stood up right in front of. We did like a double date because she has a friend who's super into Taylor Swift too. And so there was these three girls who were in the row in front of us, and they stood up for the whole time. Like, it's between songs, and they're still standing. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, you can sit down sometimes. And they were also just blatant felonies were happening. Everybody was just filming the screen. I was like, usually they are in the theaters, like...
No.
Oh, get out! Like, but I think there was nothing any movie attendant could do at that point. But anyway, these three girls are just standing right in front of Krista's friend and her husband. And so finally at one point, her friend, like, between songs went up to them and was like, could you guys go stand, like, further down where there's nobody else behind you? And they just walked away, which was just a great moment. And so we enjoyed the rest of it.
Yeah, so I mean, the Taylor Swift whole mania thing is just, I repeatedly have to remind myself and to constantly reflect on how swiftly all that exists is coming to be swept and disappears from sight. I'm like, this too shall pass.
I will say, there's, speaking of like the screaming, unironically or ironically, there is just something so fun about just Taylor does something on screen, and I just say, just out loud for everybody in the theater, just
yes,
literal perfection. And just the amount of people who look over and just nod aggressively, like, yes, that's what I've been saying.
Oh, yeah.
And then Krista smiles at me because she kind of knows what I'm doing, but she also enjoys it, so it's fun.
Yeah, is it... I don't know, but was it a Taylor Swift concert or an Epictetus concert?
Ooh.
Harkening back into the deep archives there.
Judging by the outfits, I think Taylor Swift.
Oh, please. Anyway, well, let's end it on that note.
On a good note of me and Krista's perfectly healthy relationship versus this singer's super unhealthy relationship with his significant other.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we just helped you consider that the view from above is better than the view from your nose. What Shatner experienced has been called the overview effect. The feeling of awe that astronauts get when they look back at the tiny blue planet that we all live on. Though we may not have a billionaire friend to take us up in a rocket, we too can experience our own overview effect as we look at the view from above.